Hey, all listeners of all flavors, Nick1 here, another Arcade Obliquely. I wanted to look into this whole Watara SuperVision thing. I vaguely remembered from the description, and I think they put it in the photo for the episode, of this whole like foldy little handheld thing. Either I don't know if I saw it in stores or just in a magazine back in the day, but I definitely remember it existing. And I'm pretty sure, I don't know if it was an import thing or something, also magazine probably. I definitely saw at some point the, like, not quite a Game Boy version. It was, they had a brick version that didn't fold with bright, like, teal buttons for the A and B. And I feel like I'd seen that before. But, yeah. So, I wanted to look into it because, again, a little bit of mystery to me. Beyond those vague memories, I hadn't really encountered it, or I've never seen anything from it played before. Until now. And yeah, just like looking into this whole thing, it was this weird blip in the handheld era. It had a lot of things that the Game Boy had going for it, and better. It had a slightly larger screen, same battery consumption, or at least same battery loadout, 4 AA's. Had a link cable, and the big thing that stood out for me was it had the whole TV out thing. I think Wiggly discussed it on the podcast. It was equivalent to the Super Game Boy's output in that it was like 4 colors, and it's actually what you're seeing right now for gameplay footage. There are emulators, we'll talk about that in a minute. Again, the Super Game Boy hadn't come out yet, and even that required another console on top of that to actually output the gameplay, and even after that, it hasn't really been a thing with handhelds. The PSP, after its, I think, second model, had an AV out, which you could do. It was actually pretty nice. You get composite or component cables for it. I still use the component version for gameplay and streaming and whatnot, so that's really the only other instance I could think of besides third-party mods, because you can get plenty of video out cards for modern handhelds. They just cost a ton of money, and your system disappears for like 4 months because there's very few people that install them, and they're usually pretty backlogged. As for the game spread itself, they're about 60 odd. I found a 40-pack, quote-unquote, complete ROM set, but I think there is one of the full 66 or 69 floating around there somewhere. A lot of stuff out of Taiwan and Hong Kong, so not much you've probably heard of. A lot of it was derivative of other games, if not complete bootlegs, but there's some decent stuff in here. I'm actually saving some racing games for Bund of the Influence and Twisty Rockets, maybe someday down the line. But yeah, Watara itself, I couldn't find anything on the company existing before this thing came out, and I definitely couldn't find anything on them existing afterwards, unless they are the Watara that became the Watara Construction Company in Australia. I have my doubts. If you want to play these games, they're out there, and you probably aren't going to get sued. Yeah, if you need to emulate, I recommend tracking down a version of Mess. More recently, it was integrated with MAME, but I couldn't quite figure out how to make that happen. There is a Mess UI version of Mess. Similar to MAME UI, it has a windowed interface. You just load up the system you want to use. You do have to, like, individually pop which game you want to play into a side menu, but it's not hard to figure out. There's video tutorials if you can't figure out quite what tab to use. And it emulates a whole bunch of other stuff too, like Apple II, and just think of a lot of things you wouldn't think there'd be emulation for. It's on Mess, so worth checking out. It's always nice to step out of the box of the big systems. You know, you had Nintendo and Sega for the longest time. You got Nintendo, Sony, and Microsoft now, but there've always been things on the sidelines, or, you know, creeping up, especially in the handheld realm. Like back in the day, you had the Wonder Swan. There was the Neo Geo Pocket Color. So yeah, it's always been around. It's just nobody else had really the marketing clout to stand up to the big 2 or big 3, depending on what time you're looking at it. I don't know if I'd recommend any of these games as, you know, memorable gameplay, as mentioned before, but it's interesting. It's weird, and weird is good. So if you're curious, yeah, just give it a try. Pretty simple to get set up. The whole ROM pack is less than a meg, and there you go.
Sfida SuperVision. 8-bit system, hi-fi stereo.
E il tuo divertimento raddoppia con il maxi schermo Top Dimension.
SuperVision, il tuo nuovo portatile con maxi schermo.
SuperVision è nei migliori negozi.